Thanks, everyone, for joining the Adaptive Cards community call, the December edition. This will be our final call of the year, so thanks for closing in the year with us. Dana mentioned we'll have links. We'll be continuing this into 2020, so this certainly won't be the last time you see us, but it will be for this season. For those of you new to the call, you can find this link. Hopefully you found it somewhere similar to this, but at aka.ms/adaptivecardscommunitycall. This will be updated. The URL will stay the same, but point to a new calendar series that you can add to your calendar. So we'll have that updated, and same time, same place, second Thursday every month. So the next call will be January 9th at 9 a.m. PST. And so I'm Matt Heidinger, David Close on the call. We basically run the Adaptive Cards project, and this is our opportunity to talk to you and your opportunity to talk to us. We like to show things as they're baking, so you get a pretty raw look into a lot of things. We've got some cool demos today to close the year. And with that, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do a quick look at the roadmap. Some of you may not have seen we are maintaining a little more user-friendly roadmap. So we'll walk through some of that. What are we closing out the year with, and what are we heading into 2020 with? This is just a minor note. I've been pushing the team, pushing myself to try and blog a little more. So we did write a couple posts last month about templating. We were at the Ignite conference. Head to the Adaptive Cards blog and expect to see more content there to stay more up to date in between some of these community calls. And the three demos that we hope to go over today. David's going to show us some major improvements to the designer that are coming. I'll let him speak to if we think we'll get those released this year, but we do have a preview URL. I'm going to walk through a demo of a Power Automate integration using templating and using Adaptive Cards much simpler. It's a preview. I didn't unfortunately get it published yet, but hopefully that'll get some wheels spinning. And then we do have one minor announcement that we won't be demoing today, but Xamarin.Android we released a preview this week. So if any of you are Xamarin developers and we're looking to round out a little bit of the cross-platform play, we've had React Native supported by our community. We've had Flutter supported by our community, and now we're officially adding Xamarin support. So we're starting with Android, then iOS, and then Xamarin Forms. So hopefully that's what you were hoping to see today, because that is what we're going to go through. So let me switch over to roadmap. So this URL, https ak.ms, let me just type that, ak.ms/ac roadmap is the very easy way that you can get to this page. AC for Adaptive Cards roadmap will take you right to this page. And we will group these things by quarter typically. So a few things that have launched in recently. We added templating support on the Adaptive Cards website. We released the preview of the Adaptive Card template service. If you aren't familiar with some of these things, you can see previous calls, but I will touch on some of them throughout this call. And then the two biggest things we were hoping to round out the year were these designer improvements that we're going to see, namely a version selector and a Power Automate connector to access the template service from Power Automate. So those were the two things we were hoping to round out the year. We're going to demo those today. And what we hope to do in the first quarter of 2020 is finish Xamarin and Xamarin Forms. Microsoft Flow, or now Power Automate, we really want to get action support finished. That is close. I know a lot of you have been asking for this. You know, you can get an Adaptive Card in Flow, but you can't actually continue an action. And we're trying to round out our function and round out more of the things that you can do with templating. A concept with the template service to automatically generate cards for you. Again, the main thing on the template service is to just make it quicker for you to get cards where you want them. Rather than build your own, we want the template service to be a place where you can contribute and use some of these things. If none of this is making sense because this is your first time hearing some of this, we will get into some of that. But I won't go into all the details in the roadmap. Q2 2020 is where you'll start to see our next major renderer release. Unofficially, this really means the Microsoft Build Conference. So you typically see us at two conferences every year, the Microsoft Build Conference in the summer, and then the Microsoft Ignite Conference in the fall. So those are our two big milestone opportunities to release for folks and get people access to things. So this really unofficially means we'll have this done around the build timeframe. And you should expect to see previews of these things before then. Q2 2020 seems a little far away. We're actively working on input validation and evolving the data collection format. You'll see probably in the January community call a nice prototype of that where we'll start getting your feedback, because we know input validation is a really, you can see 45 people have commented on this one particular issue. So take a look at the roadmap. If you don't see what you want on there, let us know. You can actually click submit an idea right here. All you have to give us is an email address, and we will start categorizing some of these things. People can vote on things. So it's a great opportunity for you to have a low friction way to help steer the direction of what we're working on. And again, the blog at adaptivecards.io, the other URL you can go to over here is the blog. And so we're just trying to blog a little more. If you didn't see the Microsoft Ignite conference, here's a quick recap. We had teamwork.com on stage with us, giving a real world perspective of things. And this kind of gets into what was going to be the first demo. So we're trying to make it easier to get started with templating, to take advantage of templating. Summarize it right in this first sentence. The whole goal of adaptive card templating is to save you time, to make it easier to build cards, populate them with real data, reuse them. If multiple people are building cards over the same data, it kind of makes sense to be able to share them, right? Why would everyone have to write templates over the graph data if we can, as a community, support each other in that? So I showed this last month, but if you haven't seen this, if you go to adaptivecards.io, you may have seen our samples before. But one difference is there's this toggle to turn on adaptive card templating. And this, with templating, again, just to give a really quick recap, a template is just an adaptive card that you're familiar with, except instead of having the data in there, if I turn off templating, you'll see the text. What am I going to do in this card? Well, I'm going to publish the adaptive card schema. And down here is a picture of me from Twitter. And it's tightly integrated with the card. So if I want to reuse this card with a picture of David or change this URL, I have to go deep into the adaptive card itself to change this data. So with templating, and if I turn this on, and everyone can follow along with this, if you go to adaptivecards.io/samples, you turn this on, and a template is the same adaptive card except for those dynamically replaceable things. Those things you might want to repopulate at runtime, you replace with these curly brace tokens. So I'm going to say, here's the profile image, and if I look up in my data, here's the creator, and the name is Matt Heidinger, profile image. So if I ever wanted to reuse this template with some different data, for example, if I click try it yourself, and I click preview mode, and I want to change this to David Clow, I can just change the data without changing the template. I can change the image down here. I don't happen to have a handy link on here, but you can see I can start to change all these things, the dynamically updatable portion of the card. And that's what templating really offers. And so samples is a great way to get started with some of this stuff. Click more about templating to get started. Because the demo that I have is having some issues, we're going to change this up really quick. And David, are you able to share from your screen? Is that the best way to show the designer stuff?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take control, because we're going to change gears, and David's going to show some big improvements to the designer that we've got coming soon.
All right, so just going to talk real quick about a few updates that we've made to the designers that are not yet public, although we have 2 new NPM packages published yesterday by Matt. They're still in preview form or alpha form, whatever we chose, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But so here it goes. So this is adaptivecards.io on the designer. This is what we currently have. And you see that we have a support for data binding here through the data structure thing. And the point is that you can drag and drop a field onto the card, and now it's actually bound to data. And when you hit that preview button, you can see that indeed it's there. So that's one of the big features of this designer. It's not an ideal experience, and we've had a lot of feedback about it, and we're trying to do something about it. One other thing that's been requested multiple times is, unfortunately, as you design cards with this experience, you basically always design cards for the latest version of adaptive cards. But not all the hosts that support rendering adaptive cards are already on 1.2. And when we release 1.3, again, the designer will be able to produce 1.3 version cards, but not all hosts will support 1.3. So the desire was to make it possible with the designer to design a card for a specific target version of the adaptive card schema. And this is something that we're also trying to address. So given that this is the old experience, I'm just going to close it. I'm going to show you what the new experience looks like. Wow, it's basically the exact same thing. Not exactly. So here you can see, for example, that data structure little toolbox has gone. It does not exist anymore, which means that you cannot drag and drop fields onto the card. But there might be a better way. Actually, if you take a text block here and you put it on the card, now you have that bind button that you can just click and hit that name property. And as a bonus feature, you can see that it's immediately being replaced with the actual value of the property, which is Matt Hittinger. I'm going to actually replace with my own name. I too don't have a link to a picture of me. So this makes it possible for the host application to actually always be in preview mode when it comes to data binding. However, this is controllable by the host application. There are 3 modes that you can choose from, either not having that live preview or having a live preview generated out of sample data, as is the case here, or you can even have some code-generated values. And this makes it essentially more straightforward for the end user to understand what actually happened. And so this experience with the little bind here, you can find also on images, which makes it a lot easier to actually change the binding on the URL of a particular image. Now, those controls are also available on the right here. So if I wanted to bind this description field to another data field, I could actually pick another value right there. And of course, you can still edit this thing and enter more complex expressions. Same for the data context, our when property that controls when an element is displayed, and a select few other properties throughout the designer experience. Beyond that, we have also combined, I don't know if you have noticed that, but there used to be a new card button and also an open sample button. Those two have been combined now in an effort to reduce the amount of space taken in the toolbar. And now we also have a preview experience. So as the new card button is clicked by the user, they can choose where they want to start from. And that could be a blank card, or that could be one of the samples that are provided by the host applications through what we call the sample catalog. And all those cards are actually rendered in preview to make it super easy for the user to pick the one that works best for you in terms of overall base layout. So those are great, hopefully. I hope you guys like them. But I think the most important feature is this target version picker that you can see at the top right of the screen. And we're going to see it in action immediately because right now the designer is set to operate in version 1.2 of adaptive cards. But what if I really want to author a card for version 1.0? So let me select that. And as you can see, the visuals of the card in the designer have changed. I still have a bug here with the selection rectangles not sizing properly. Has changed. We don't have that green area anymore. And also now we have 2 parse errors. One is telling us that the style value of good is only supported in version 1.2, but we're set on 1.0, and also that the bleed property that was used on that green container is also only supported in 1.2, but we're using version 1.0. So this is the kind of experience that you can expect from the designer, where anything that might not be compatible in a payload that you might have pasted into that area will be mentioned here. The card as rendered will simply ignore those features or fall back to what's the default, or what was the default in that particular version. And you will also not be able to use elements that were not available in that particular version. For example, action set was not available in 1.0 and therefore is not listed in the card elements toolbox. Similarly, we were talking about that bleed property as well as the container style. As I select that container in the design surface, you can see that the elements property toolbox does not list the bleed property, and that the style combo box does not list the good style. If I switch back to 1.2 and go back to that same container, you can now see that the style property is a little richer and that the bleed property is available. So this is in a nutshell how the designer will work. However, there's one more thing I'd like to mention, is that this whole experience, especially the version picker, is associated with a big refactor of the underlying adaptive card renderer for JavaScript that needed to be updated so as to allow for those for this new experience to be possible. As it was coded before, it was a little too rigid and not flexible enough, and it would have been a lot of if statements everywhere, not very practical and not very future-proof. So it's been changed significantly, and if you're going to take a dependency on the newest package, which is this one on NPM, do expect a number of breaking changes in your code, something that you can probably deal with once and be done with, and that the designer actually, now this new package here, 0.8, has a dependency on the 2.0 alpha release of adaptive cards. Last word, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you click on the versions tab right there, yeah, right there.
Yes.
So this is how you can see the latest two versions. So if you just install adaptive cards, you'll get 1.2.5, which is the latest stable release. If you want to opt into 2.0 and try these new preview things, you explicitly install the @next tag. And so we'll continue the stable version will continue to be you have to explicitly opt in to the 2.0 next, but we'll keep publishing the two.
And a last word around those version numbers, for that matter. If you used any of our renderers so far, you probably know the pattern that each renderer version actually echoes the adaptive card schema version that it implements. So the 1.0 release implemented the 1.0 adaptive card schema, and all 1.2 releases are associated with adaptive cards 1.2. Well, we're changing that because now basically the JavaScript renderer is able to produce and parse any version of the adaptive card schema, 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 when we actually ship it. So we are bumping it to version 2.0, and at that point, now the version of the renderer is not echoing the version of the adaptive card schema anymore and will evolve independently. That's basically it. If you have any question,
awesome.
Go ahead.
And yeah, people should feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll get to them throughout. We do have a spot for Q&A at the end, so I'll take over really briefly here. But if you have questions along the way, please do ask them. So David, I shared in this link within the chat, and for folks who want to follow along with everything David just showed, again, this is a preview link, so it's not going to be stable all the time. It's actually a live build of an active pull request. So it's working right now. It could go down, but if you want to play with any of that stuff, head to this link, and I did paste it in the chat as well. So we'd love your feedback on this. Again, it's currently baking. I'll talk with David after this call. Maybe we'll try and get this published to adaptivecards.io before the end of the year. The packages won't be released necessarily, but we could at least get it on adaptivecards.io. So that maybe we'll get a little more eyes on it. But if you do find feedback on it, certainly if you test it and you find any issues, please do let us know and we'll get those addressed.
Yeah, the key here is that because of that big refactor of the renderer, we want to be prudent and make sure that we're not going to break, compatibility with applications.
Right.
So your help would indeed be super helpful.
Okay, so thank you, David. Really quickly, I'll just mention again, Xamarin.Android preview has been released. So if you go to NuGet, this is a long URL, but if you go to NuGet and just search for Adaptive Cards Xamarin, you would find this, Adaptive Cards Rendering Xamarin.Android. The docs will be published, I think later today. We're just making some minor changes. So if you're a Xamarin user, this hopefully will help you get started. A nice thing is it just encapsulates our native Android renderer, so it's battle tested and hardened, and this isn't a new renderer that we have to maintain that might have bugs. It's just a C# wrapper around our Android renderer, which gives us just a lot of confidence that we know that it works well and it's been used in a lot of apps. So try this out. iOS and Xamarin Forms will be released early into next year, but Android's preview's out now. Okay, last demo, and it's not working. I tried getting time to get it working. The good news, bad news, I don't know how to say it. It's not failing on my stuff, so it's failing at an earlier step. But let me walk through what exactly is going on. So David just showed you a new data binding experience in the designer. That's great if you want to build templates over your own cards. But something we've shown a couple times is this concept of, sorry, I'm flipping around a little bit. Let me just show you the Graph Explorer. This concept of why the joke I always make is, the cheapest way to get anything done is to have someone else do it. And that's really what this is about. Let's take the Microsoft Graph as an example. Many of you are probably familiar with the Microsoft Graph. If you go to the Graph Explorer and add a WAC preview at the end, you will get this experience. And it's the same Graph Explorer with some preview features added. So if I hit run query, and this is hitting graph.microsoft.com/me, here's the data I get back. And this is just JSON data, my display name, job title, mail, office location, if you want to camp out and tell me what feature you need. It's just data, which is fine. And then now it's up to you to basically build a adaptive card template over it, or put it in your app in some other way. So we're trying to ease that. We're trying to make that easier for you to get this adaptive card into your app. Step one of this, or rather step 0 in the preview, is this adaptive cards tab. So what happens really briefly when I click on that is it says fetching adaptive card. Again, you can follow along with this today if you want. If everyone just heads to this, you can do exactly what I'm doing. And you get an adaptive card template over that data. So the same template, it was built using the designer, just like David showed. The only difference is this particular template was added to a GitHub repository called Adaptive Cards Templates, and we group them by graph.microsoft.com. And this one happens to be profile.json. And here is the adaptive card template, the exact one that you're seeing. And we put these in a GitHub repository because we make them available in a REST service that can say, hey, I've got some data. Do you have a template for it? So what I'm going to switch gears here and show is Postman. And Postman is a tool for doing HTTP requests. It's a really great tool for just testing HTTP requests. So this template service that we've built that helps you find, create, and discover templates that maybe other people have written. So I can go to templates.adaptivecards.io/find, and I can pass in a data type. I'm looking for templates that are Microsoft Graph users. And if I hit send, I'll get a bunch of templates back with a confidence score, like how closely do these templates match the data you put in. And there's other ways to use this as well. I can do list to just get all the templates. Once I have a template, let me show this how this works completely end to end. Let's do the very long way. Let's say I've got this data and I want to know, is there an adaptive card template over this? One way to do that is to go to the /find endpoint. I do a post to /find. The body of the post, I'm going to paste in that data. So I'm basically doing HTTP post to find. Here's the data. I just got some data somewhere. This happens to be graph data. Doesn't have to be graph data. I'm just using graph data as an example. And I'm going to hit send. And what the service is going to do is analyze the properties of this data and see if it finds a template that matches those same properties. And it gives you a confidence. So in this case, it thinks, hey, I think the Microsoft Graph profile template matches your data exactly, 100% confidence. We also have this other template. Finos is an open financial repository that standardizes financial data. So it looks like, hey, there's a bond template as well, but the confidence in that, oops, sorry, I clicked on something. The confidence in that one is only 8%. So you can try this template with this data, but you might not like what you get back. That's basically what the confidence does. So what I'll do is take this template URL. Instead of passing to find, I'll put it right here. So now I'm posting my same data to this URL, and I hit send. And what I'm going to get back is an adaptive card ready to render. Go back over here, paste that into adaptivecards.io/designer. And what you will see is the exact same thing that you see in Graph Explorer, right? So you don't, the key thing here is you don't have to, again, I always have to do a slight recap. So those of you who have seen this a bunch of times, I apologize. For those of you new, hopefully this is a somewhat, you can at least kind of follow along on what we're doing. That said, you don't have to send your data to this service. That's a big part of what we want to offer. So you don't have to send your data. You could do a GET on that same URL. And what you get back here is just the template without any private data in here. You can see these curly brace tokens. This is all the dynamic data. So if I paste that into the designer, now you can see it's got all these curly brace things. And that is where the sample data comes in, where I can say display name is Matt Heidinger. And if I click on preview mode, it'll show you what that card looks like with sample data. And then the last piece on all this is you want to then use it in your own app. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the Graph Explorer, this is all about helping you get started. But then what if you want to use this template in your app? So the only way I'm going to show, one way I'm going to show that today is in Flow. And hopefully some of that rambling is going to make this demo work again. So here's what I'm trying to do. I'm not an expert at Power Automate. I did this mainly to learn more about it. For those that didn't hear a month ago, I guess, Microsoft Flow got renamed to Power Automate. It's part of the Power Platform along with Power BI, Power Apps, one other one I can't remember, and Power Automate. And the way we position this is a development platform for power users or citizen developers, and it lets you do some pretty powerful things without necessarily having to write code. So what I have in this Power Automate, you basically trigger when something happens. So what I'm going to build at the end of this is a bot. I can show you here a simple low-code bot. If I go 1 second, make this smaller. Here's what I'm trying to build. Something where I can just say lookup and then a alias, we call them, or a domain user account. So mine happens to be Mahiding. It's not the greatest of ones, but it's a combination of all our names. So I could look up someone and Flow will return the profile of that person. So again, this is the same profile you saw in Graph Explorer. I just want to build a bot that I can quickly do lookup and then, type in someone's alias and it'll give me their information. The trick here is I want to do this without writing any traditional code. I'm not quite there yet. Come January, Hopefully I'll have a better end-to-end view. But what I was doing to test this is I just want to manually trigger a flow. That means I'm basically testing it. I'm going to click a button, and it's going to activate this flow. The first step in the flow is get my profile. And the way this works is I click on add an action, and here's a whole bunch of actions that I can choose from. Some are built in. Some are part of some premium store that you have to subscribe to a service in there. But it's pretty neat. I mean, you can do all sorts of stuff, like get a row out of Excel, get worksheets out of Excel, list rows, get the weather forecast, get a list of teams. There's all sorts of things you can do. Again, I'm not an expert in all this, so I was just figuring this out in the last week. But what I know I can do is say get my profile. And this is an Office one. It's very simple. Get my profile. One that I'm going to do with the lookup one is if I type Office, I could do something like Office 365 users. And what I'm going to do, what I would do in that one that I just showed you is get user profile. And you can see that it's saying, okay, well, what's the user you want to use? In this case, it would be, hiding. But the trick, and if you can sort of picture how this would work in reality, is this would be passed along from the chat message. So I'm not going to hard code my hiding in here. I'm going to look it up via the text that was typed in. So this text would be pulled out of Teams, passed into this, and it would look up a user. For this simple demo, I'm not looking up a user. I'm just getting my own profile because I'm logged into Flow. It knows my own profile. Now that hopefully you sort of get Power Automate, this is the new piece, the piece that I wanted to build last week. So this is populate an adaptive card with a template and data. So what I want to do is say, well, what template? I want to build an adaptive card, and what template do I want to use? Well, there's a drop down here of all the templates that the service offers today. And you can see there's a bunch of graph ones. There's that Finos one that we saw. And what this really is a list of all the templates in this GitHub repository called Adaptive Cards templates. So if someone added a new template, let's say one of you on this call said, okay, I want to build a template over something we don't have. Like as an example, I can click on, probably shouldn't actually click on any of these, my mail or items in my drive. I probably click on my photo. If I click on something like Excel, just to give you an idea, right now, if I click on this worksheets and a workbook, so this is a graph API. Here's the data. Well, it's not allowing me to get any data. But the point is, if I click on adaptive cards, it says the adaptive card for this response is not available. And what that means is no one has written a template over the Excel workbook items. We don't have one yet. So the hope with this service is that anyone can contribute these templates by just adding a file here. The community currently would be Microsoft, would review these templates. And all you have to do is add a file. The service gets deployed, and then I would come back to Flow, and magically this list would automatically have a new template, maybe one called graph.microsoft.com/Excel workbooks or something like that. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to pick the profile template. Again, all I'm doing is a nice simple way of accessing that same service. You saw I used the graph.microsoft.com/profile template here. Only in this case, I'm doing it from Power Automate. And what's the data that I want to pass to the service? Again, just like I passed in the Postman request, I want to pass in that same data. In this case, it's the user from the Graph API from this previous step. So in the previous step, I'm getting my profile, and then I'm using that data to pass to the template service. And then finally, which that returns an adaptive card, I am going to send a adaptive card to Microsoft Teams. And ideally, I would have shown that to you before trying to talk through all of it. We're going to click test. We're going to run this flow. We're going to see if it runs. Previously, it was failing on the get my profile step, but maybe enough time has passed and it will work. So I click run flow. It says it ran. I click the flow's run page. And it says it failed. unfortunately. And what is happening, there must be a problem in the service right now. It's actually failing on the get my profile step, showing the server returned an error. So something seems to be wrong with the Office service today. They might have a service outage or something, or I'm doing something wrong, but this was working, as is obvious by my previous runs. That were working. So what happens though is, you can see I last did this on Monday and a bunch of other times. It puts the card into Teams, as you know, it just shows it, and the flow basically took care of all that. So to show it, I guess, to show that the service works, let me do one quick thing. And instead of doing get my profile, I'm going to delete this step. And I'm just going to hard code some data. So we just showed in the Graph Explorer that I can get my data. Again, just to keep in mind, I know I'm going a little fast here. This is just JSON data. So it's not an adaptive card. There's no way to display this data. The template service helps you display that data. So I'm going to take that data, and just for the sake of demoing, I'm going to paste it right here. So here's the data. Here's the template I want to use. And then I'm going to send that into Teams. So if I hit save and I hit test, let's see if this one works. Because now it should work, although it's not dynamically uploading anymore. Oh boy, what have I done? Something is not valid at OData context. Okay. This is why I'm not an expert at flow. Test.
I wish I could help you, Matt, but I can't.
Okay, so possibly it ran. If we go back to Teams, we would see the card if it ran successfully. Nope, flow run failed. Let's see why. Let's see if we can live debug this stuff. The specified team request message is invalid. Oh, bummer. Demo fails. Not entirely sure why, because I did get the card. It feels like something, I don't know if there's any flow people on the call who might be able to help me, but it does seem like I lost connection with my environment, because the Office API calls are no longer working. So it's not able. The cool thing about this, when it was working, and possibly I did something wrong, is I didn't have to authenticate with any of these things, because it's tightly integrated with all of my my Microsoft 365 things like Microsoft Teams and Office. It was really easy. I seriously built this flow in a matter of minutes, and was testing it. But now I seem to have broken something with my data connection, which is kind of a bummer. Was someone trying to help me? please do.
Hedinger, actually, I'm able to see the channel ID as some ID with .skype. So is this the right one?
I don't know. All I did in here is, here, I can redo this whole step. This is what's so populating an adaptive card, and then what do I want to do with it? I want to click on new step, and I'm going to go to Teams. Oh man. And those insulators who are coming to add insulation to my attic just buzzed my door. So they're going to have to wait for a second. I want to post a message. I want to post an adaptive card. And here's the adaptive card. So post your own adaptive card as the Flowbot to a channel. That's the one I want to do. And I want to select my team, which is adaptive cards, and I want to select my channel, which is integration flow, and the message is the adaptive card from the previous step. So that's what I did. And I'll click test, and if it doesn't work, we'll just have to chalk that up as we'll have an opportunity to do it again in January. The thing I will mention is this connector was really easy to build. You basically point it at your OpenAPI spec, which is just a spec. Oh, it looks like it says it succeeded. Let's check Teams. Hey, we got it, 9:43 a.m. Now, that's pretty cool. So it basically
Finally,
ran.
it's working.
Yeah. I am hearing the virtual applause. So this was really cool, like just to just really kind of encapsulate everything that just happened and why this is so neat. I'm using adaptive cards and taking advantage of adaptive cards and populating it with real data, but I didn't have to build an adaptive card myself. Someone else built this adaptive card called profile.json. They submitted it to this GitHub repository, which I know that's a little bare bones right now, and in the long term, we'll probably make this a little more seamless. They submitted it, though, to the shared repository, the shared open repository, and now everyone can take advantage of it. So this is kind of what I got at. If the cheapest way to do something is just have someone else do it. So hopefully by next month, this will be available. I'm going through all the process of making this connector available. So right now you can't use this particular one. If anyone wants to email me, though, I'll send them how I built it. It was actually pretty easy. But there's a lot of other stuff you can do in here. But this was kind of a neat way of saying, hey, here's the template I want to use. Here's the data I want to use. And then I can do anything with it. In this case, I'm sending it to Teams, but I could have emailed it. I could have rendered it in my own app. What you do with this is on your own. And that's what's really neat about Power Automate is you can put these blocks together in really compelling ways to do pretty neat things for your business or even personal use without having to write any code. So that was the lap around that. I'm glad it kind of worked. I wish the previous step would have worked as well. Were there any questions that people had that we should ask? I'll see if maybe I can get this to work, but I don't know if it's going to. But Dana or David, did you happen to see any?
Nope. I think it's been pretty quiet. Does anyone have any questions you guys want to ask? Nope.
All right. Well, then we can call it at that. I'll hit test one last time, and then I will switch to, perform. Dun, 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 dun.
So is making input fields mandatory part of your plan next sprint?
Is making input fields mandatory. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean?
So as of now, in the adaptive cards, there's no option to make the input fields mandatory, be it text or anything, like selecting any input date, multiple choice.
Oh, validation. Yes, that is absolutely. We'll share some details most likely in January. Hopefully, we're actively working on it. But yeah, that is the validation and stuff is a big feature that we're working on right now.
Yeah, because that will help a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was kind of cool, a bit like at the end. So this is fully working. I'm getting a profile, passing in the data, hitting test, everything worked. I don't know how my permissions got kind of messed up, but this is pretty cool. The final step in this is I'll look this up via what they typed in Teams, and then my flow will be completely automated, and people will be able to look up where people's offices are. And I didn't even have to write any code. I didn't have to write any specific adaptive card, and you get a really nice experience from within Teams. So hopefully you'll be able to all play with that next month. I'll try and get this connector released. Last thing I talked about a little bit, go to ak.ms/AC features and vote on what you had or what you need. Tell us, just like validation. Our next call will be Thursday, January 9th, same time, same place. This video will be up at aka.ms/office dev YouTube. You can also find it at the Adaptive Cards blog. If you missed the Microsoft Ignite session last month, take a look. It goes through a lot of this stuff in a little more detail. We had a little more time. The roadmap, features. I think that was it. If there weren't any questions, let me check the chat.
No, a couple things. The aka.ms, the Adaptive Cards community call, should be updated now. It will go from January through June 2020, and then we'll start a new series from then. We're just working on a few things for that. And then the last thing, I also posted in the chat a community call survey. It's really short, a few questions. We'd love your feedback. We're just trying to make these better for everyone and make sure you're getting all the right content. So if you could take a few minutes and fill that out sometime this month, that would be great.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thanks as always for joining these. We look forward to seeing you again in 2020 and hope everyone has a good holiday and new year, and we'll talk to you later. And Eli just asked real quick, can I share the GitHub path? I will share all these links and they will be up in the blog post as well.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.